Happy Friday. Welcome to Crypto in America Live, the only show bringing you candid conversations on the biggest news stories, legal issues, and policy developments shaping the crypto world every Friday at 12:30 Eastern. Hey, guys.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. What's up, Jackie? Did we lose her? She's muted.
Oh my gosh, I muted myself before we started recording because I had a cough. But I was saying we had a long week is what I said. We started with the Solana Policy Institute Summit, which was a lot of fun, a great event. Shout out to them. But it feels like I've lived like 10 lives since Monday. So I don't know if you guys feel similarly.
Can't believe that was Monday. It was. We were all on stage with Solana Foundation President Lily Liu. That was a lot of fun. I just can't believe that was a whole 4 days ago now.
I know, that was fun. And then so also just foreign correspondent, made 2 trips up to the city this week. So just got back from New York. I was at an AI and blockchain event hosted by Brown Rudnick yesterday. So yeah, we've been it's been a good week. It's been a long week.
What'd you learn, Gerald?
I learned actually, so one of the best panels was how sports leagues, like professional sports, are using LLMs. There's a bunch of crazy stuff about how like professional sports are trying to use AI, which is probably the subject of like an entire different episode. I also learned that people are still bullish on Clarity at some point. So, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit today. But yeah. I also learned that the train does, in fact, occasionally run on time.
So. Even in hot weather.
Yeah. The Acela worked out. Impressive. The Acela worked out this week. Yeah.
All right.
Does a little bit of a better job
to New York when you want to come back, Gerald. Well, permit.
Does a little bit better of a job than New Jersey Transit, at least.
Yeah.
Well, we have a big show for you guys today. Joining us, we have Ayyan Rahman. He is the co-founder of OnRe Finance to discuss the latest developments involving Drift Protocol. We have some new developments there we'll discuss in the headlines in just a minute. We also have Bhau Kotecha. He is the co-founder of Paxos Labs on the company's recent $12 million fundraise and how it plans to use that capital to scale on-chain yield. And we have Salman Banaei. He's the GC at Plume Network, and he's going to round out the hour discussing the SEC's guidance on DeFi front ends. That also came out Monday when we were at the Solana event. That does feel like a long time ago now, but big deal for the DeFi community, for all of crypto, frankly. Long-awaited guidance that I think people have been watching the SEC for now for years, in fact. And it comes as, like you mentioned, Gerald, everybody's waiting on clarity, right? The Clarity Act, but they get some clarity in the meantime from the SEC. But before we get into all that, let's get into the headlines. One of my favorite stories this week was the would-be Fed chair who is going to potentially replace Fed Chair Jay Powell if Tom Tillis is a yes vote. He is the hinging vote on the Senate Banking Committee. Kevin Warsh will be up in front of the Senate Banking Committee for his nomination hearing on Tuesday. Ahead of that, we got his financial disclosures. It was 69 pages worth of all the assets he's invested in, over $100 million. And a lot of that was crypto. I mean, you guys saw the list. And let's pull it up here. We have CoinDesk did a pretty comprehensive rundown of all the companies that he is invested in. And look at this. I mean, we've got Compound. We've got DYDX. We've got Solana.
He's a lighter guy. He's a lighter over Hyperliquid. That's a choice.
Well, you kind of have to be if you're going to get nominated for a US position.
Why? Because Hyperliquid's not in the US. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Fine. He's picking the homegrown ones. Yeah. That's so interesting, Ellie.
And he's also
which one do you own?
Well, I don't have any exposure at all. There was one
for the audience.
There was one that was going around crypto Twitter that was quite funny. I want to be clear here. He is not personally invested in any of these. He has exposure to them through a couple of fund structures, through LP structures. But the one name that I think a lot of people were making jokes about on crypto Twitter was the Web3 community platform Friends with Benefits. I think a lot of the bigger platforms not in crypto pulled this up and said, this is an interesting thing to be invested in Kevin Warsh. Do you have any explanation? So I think bottom line is he is more exposed to crypto than perhaps anybody in the community actually thought, and the average Fed chair for sure. And this will definitely be the subject of a lot of questions by some of the senators next Tuesday, especially those who are hot on financial conflicts of interest.
Yeah, I think the interesting one to me was also Blast, like RIP Blast. I don't know if you guys remember.
Blast from the past, yeah.
But no, I mean, it's interesting to obviously see someone who is at least as familiar with the space as he is, right? Like, even if it is sort of like ancillary exposure, it's good that, we have somebody coming in that I guess at least is tangentially interested in the space. And so that overall is bullish.
I agree with you on that, Gerald. I think a lot of times, like, if you don't actually engage with the technology, you really don't fully understand it. So the fact that he or his entities have in some capacity makes me feel a bit better. But we'll see how it goes next week, like Ellie mentioned.
Yeah. And then there's also, I mean, the thing that we didn't talk about is obviously like all the drama around, senators like Tillis saying that, before this Powell stuff is resolved, like nothing is changing. Powell has said he'll stay on. So it's great that Warsh like has a nomination. We're going to go through that process, but I think it's going to be a little more complicated than it usually would be, because usually this is like pretty boring, right? Oh, new Fed chair, awesome. But there's a little more drama around it this time.
It's never dull. It really is never dull.
Yeah.
But it'll be
good for us. Great for us.
I'll be honest. I haven't used all those companies on that list.
Yeah.
Like, I'm obviously familiar with them, but it's interesting. I wonder what they're being used for too. Like, obviously, aside from the obvious of what each one stands for. But like with Solana, Optimism, like those are bigger entities that it's not just like, oh, I'm using like a DEX, like it's probably a bit more nuanced.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if the White House budges on their investigation into Powell, because that's a big thing that Tillis has been harping on. Jackie, I don't know if you've been following this part of the drama.
No, explain it to me.
So Trump and Powell obviously had their beef for years now over cutting rates and whatnot. And Powell has said he intends to stay on past May 15th if Warsh doesn't get confirmed, but Warsh may not get confirmed because there's this whole investigation into Powell over the alleged lying to Congress about the amount of money spent on the new Fed building. And there's but these senators are saying, we really want to confirm Kevin Warsh and get this new Fed chair in there, but we will not do it unless this bogus probe into Fed Chair Powell is dropped. And, Trump, when he gets his backup about something, he doesn't tend to drop it. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether the administration does back down on this probe or whether it doesn't. And then that will dictate the timeline on whether Kevin Warsh gets confirmed or not.
Yeah. And I will just say before we move on, like there's been a lot of controversial nominations for this administration, and they've all gone, varying degrees of okay, right? But I think what is missed on this like Fed chair nomination is, the Fed is kind of like the Vatican of the United States. Like, you don't mess with the Fed or its independence, because it is the backbone of literally like the global economy. So, they're taking this one a little more seriously. Like, it's, a lot of nominations that people were skeptical about initially for appointments, like, got through in the past, like whether it was, FBI director or health secretary or defense secretary, like all these people. And like the Fed is a little like you don't mess with the Fed. So hopefully they will resolve this probe and we'll be able to move forward, because any kind of volatility at the Fed does impact like the entire like stability of the dollar. So I hope they can, resolve that.
Yep. In a nutshell. Good job, Cheryl. Well, let's move on.
I feel educated now. Yeah, let's move on.
We could spend a whole episode talking about it. Another interesting development this week is the backlash against World Liberty Financial, which is the platform backed by President Trump and his sons. They're facing more backlash from investors over a new governance proposal that would basically extend the token lockups for early investors by up to 4 years. So Under this new plan, investors wouldn't be able to access their holdings until around 2030. And that includes a 2-year token lockup followed by a 2-year vesting period. And the firm says the move is supposed to support long-term stability and encourage investors to stay with the platform long-term. But my understanding is that they raised so much money sort of in the initial, the early days of the platform, that giving token holders, those early investors like Justin Sun, back their tokens all at once would basically crash the platform. So they have to kind of let it, play out over a long period of time. But I think a lot of people are now calling out World Liberty for potentially shady governance practices. Justin Sun certainly is. We did a big crypto Twitter spat between the platform and Justin Sun, which has been interesting to watch. I don't know. Gerald, I know you know more about governance and DAOs and proposals and that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting one. If you guys have any thoughts on it.
There's a line here from Justin that says, he's like, oh, I've been a supporter of Trump, which, of course, he's going to say something like that. And then he says, however, what was never disclosed to me or any investor is this: World Liberty secretly embedded a backdoor blacklist function in the smart contract deploying the World Liberty Fi token. This feature grants the company unilateral power to freeze, restrict, or even effectively confiscate the property rights of any token holder without notice, without reason, and without any avenue for recourse. This is the antithesis of decentralization. It is a trap masquerading as a door. Woof.
Yeah. So
and then here's another one. Listen, Justin Sun was going off this week on it, which is very different from like the relationship he had 6 to 12 months ago.
Even like a month ago, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Time flies. Yeah.
So I'm feeling a little spicy today. It's Friday, so we're going to dig into this a little bit. This is bad.
Yes.
Like this is very bad. Yes. And so the real challenge here, though, from a legal perspective, so this is going to become like a huge, like, especially if, Congress flips. I know everybody was already thinking that, World Liberty was probably going to be the subject of, some investigations in the future. What this also opens them up exposure to legally is they have agreements with investors that did not contemplate this at all. And so the more they kind of go, and I honestly, I want to believe that World Liberty is doing interesting things in DeFi, and that it is like a very legitimate part of the crypto ecosystem. The problem is when you put out proposals like this, and you also do this on the back of minting a bunch of USD1 with these holdings, you create real problems between yourself and your investors legally. This isn't like a random DeFi project where, hey, we want to have a governance vote and change something around. There's major conflicts of interest and contractual issues between them and their investors that they're kind of papering over through a governance proposal. So I hope that they see you in court. I mean, it's not just going to be Justin.
It's also tacky. I find that tweet tacky coming from a company account.
And there's a part in the proposal at the end that says if you do not agree to this proposal, then your tokens are subject to lock up indefinitely. So it's basically if you don't agree, then you kind of SOL.
Yeah. And I think, Justin's sort of past aside, it'd be great to have him on to talk about this, honestly. But I think
get Justin.
There are people who worked with World Liberty in good faith. And this is a pretty big wedge that you're putting between you and basically everybody who believed in your project. So it's I think it's a challenging situation for them to roll out.
Yeah. I don't think it's the best look. We will see how it pans out, but it's not looking good as it's panning out currently.
We'll stay on it. Definitely one to watch. And another thing to watch, which I will be watching this weekend, hopefully, is the SEC getting into podcasting, and their first episode with crypto mom Hester Peirce talking about the agency's shift from hostility to embracing crypto. So we have a little clip. Let's run it.
The one interesting thing is, the president has often said that he wants to make America the crypto capital of the world.
We do want to make this the place where people want to innovate, whether it's in crypto or something else. If we can encourage people to build here, our investors will benefit, our markets will benefit.
This is a very important inflection point in the American markets.
Material matters.
Ooh.
I like to think that they were so inspired by crypto in America that they started their own podcast.
We could ask them, maybe. I know they listen to the show. Like SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce has told us that. She was our first guest, for those who are not aware. And then we just had Paul on as well. And maybe he had so much fun, to your point, Eleanor, that he was like, you know what? I'm going to go launch a show too.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's great for like accessibility. Like, I think that's been one of the themes of this SEC is that, they want people to know what's going on. They want to be, we've said before, like Chair Atkins, definitely a man of the people. He's out and about in the community. So yeah, it's cool to see them launch. Obviously, I think it'll be really interesting to see like how that develops, like what kind of content they're planning on putting out there. And then of course the agencies, like when they're rolling out so much regulatory guidance, so many new things, like them having a voice, I think is obviously also important to them. So yeah, cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Something else that was notable to me, just talking about institutions and crypto going mainstream, was this tweet from my friend Nate, who has an ETF podcast. And it kind of just broke down just put into perspective, really, the fact that institutions are here, right? Gerald, the suits are here, you like to say. But I think one of the biggest predictions from last year is that 2026 would really be the year of institutional adoption. And you can just see here that is really living up to the prediction is coming true. I mean, you have Goldman Sachs getting into the ETF game. Morgan Stanley's Bitcoin ETF was its best performing ETF out of all of its ETFs. Charles Schwab's about to launch Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF trading to compete with Robinhood. And yeah, I mean, the story kind of writes itself, but this was a nice little roundup of just how much 2026 is the year the institutions are coming in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of funny because every time I see these new headlines, I'm like, it's not moving the markets the way it used to. Like if even one of these things was launched like 4 years ago, it would be like Bitcoin to 100K,
Yeah. Or no. Bitcoin's dead.
Well, it's actually, so I think it's actually up like 3% today or something, but that's like based on like broader like macro news. Yeah, I think, Jackie, to your point, like suits getting like TradFi getting into crypto does not necessarily benefit the people who are not TradFi as much as you would hope. I think the industry is having a little bit of a reckoning with that, and that's obviously also playing into the clarity discussions. But yeah, it's exciting to see. I think we've had a lot of guests on the show before. We're talking about America being the deepest, most liquid markets in the world, and so recognizing the crypto as a part of that, I think is great for us. And then of course, what was also missed there is of course like Chris Perkins, friend of the show, going over to Fidelity, which is a huge move. So
Franklin Templeton.
Yes. Fidelity is also in
the other F company. Yes.
Sorry, Chris. Yeah. But yeah, very exciting.
Yeah. Speaking of exciting things, Ellie, you want to get into the Tether backing Drift news here?
Yes.
So quite a comeback story, maybe?
Yeah. Well, interesting, definitely. Drift partnering with Tether as part of its recovery plan after the $280 million hack, which we spent an entire episode talking about, I think two shows ago. But basically they are, I guess, kind of ending the partnership. I don't know if it was a partnership, but ending the
integration with USDC.
The integration, that was it. The integration.
That's an easy way to put it. Yeah.
There we go. And replacing it with USDT. Basically, Tether is giving $127 million in funding towards the rebuilding and reimbursing of users of the Drift hack and helping to stabilize the platform in exchange for Drift basically moving away, like you said, Jackie, from USDC and making USDT its primary settlement layer going forward. And it's come as there's been widespread criticism of how Circle has responded, or lack of responded, to the hack. They're now facing a class action lawsuit. Circle is for failing to freeze the hacked funds when they were going across the bridge. It was filed in a Massachusetts district court yesterday. We want to get into all of this with our first guest of the hour. He sold his first company actually to Circle, an on-chain privacy protocol called Gateway, to Circle last year. So we're going to get into all of the details. And please welcome Ayyan Rahman from OnRe Finance.
Hey, Ayyan.
How are you guys
How
doing?
are you?
Hey, good.
I'm doing well. Thanks for
I think
having
this,
me.
before we get into it, this is the power of crypto Twitter, because Ayyan tweeted something and I sent it in our chat. I said, let's see if he wants to come on to talk about it. So if you're tweeting spicy stuff out there, maybe you'll end up on Crypto in America.
Yeah.
Probably one of the first times I've actually put out a hot take and it was like quickly picked up. So I guess that's good for founders to continue to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to
100%.
say, give us your hot take for the readers or the audience, the listeners who might not have seen your tweet.
Yeah, I think that, you guys covered it quite well, where it's Tether is kind of coming in right now, and they're providing a credit facility towards Drift to be able to help support them in the current situation, to be able to not only make users whole, but there's a shift that's happening. The immediate plan is for them to move all their trading pairs over to USDT, which I think for the longest time we've seen Tether being utilized as a payments infrastructure across multiple different networks. In Ethereum's ecosystem, a few $1 billion worth of TVL sits on USDT in terms of its borrow lending markets across Aave and other larger markets. So I think that this is twofold for Tether. One, it's an opportunity for USDT to be utilized more effectively as a pair asset for perp protocols. And I think that right now USDC probably makes up a large portion of the trading activity on Hyperliquid. So this is an opportunity for USDT to really step up its opportunity within that market. And then two, for the foundation and for Solana as a whole, as an ecosystem, for them, for a while, it's been a focus of being able to diversify their stable coins and the ecosystem that they've built out for DeFi. And I think this is a major movement towards that vision of USDC having less of a stronghold there.
So do you kind of see this like as a shift towards USDT in DeFi, particularly on Solana? And like this is going to be kind of like a move forward where it's not like maybe they bought influence or they bought a good PR move for 150 million, but in a way they kind of did. Or it's almost like, hey, we believe in you guys.
Partnership. It's a strategic partnership.
Sure. What do you think, Ayyan?
Trust is lost pretty easily, right? And I think for a couple of years now, we've seen instances where Circle has gotten significant backlash from the DeFi ecosystem. I can't remember what exactly the situation was, but they had mistakenly frozen a couple of addresses that were using USDC. And then now you have a situation like this where you weren't able to move as quickly on the infrastructure side, which where the hacker utilized CCTP to move funds from Solana to Ethereum. And so that is like a major red flag for a lot of people. And if you actually took a look at what Tether did, although it's a small amount, they actually shut down their bridging infrastructure relatively quickly. So while everyone's caught up on like the fact that they're coming in and supporting Solana and supporting the Drift protocol team, the reality is that Tether acts very quickly. And so while trust is easily lost, and I know like we're saying that they're buying into the ecosystem here, but it's a perfect opportunity. Why wouldn't they? Right? They want to be able to win market share. They want to be able to become the go-to asset for DeFi, and this is the perfect opportunity to do so. Does it work out? I'm not sure. I do think though that this is like the necessary step to take.
Yeah. So Ayyan, where does Circle go from here? Because I think historically, like Circle has been kind of dominating the US space, but now after the passage of Genius, we have tons of like stablecoin issuers as a service. We have Tether, who has traditionally been outside the US, but obviously launching USAT and looking for much deeper depth in these markets. Like, how do you think Circle ends up faring here, knowing that like so much of their model is being challenged or changing right now?
Yeah, I think that there's been a push from Circle's ecosystem for a while to move over to a lot more infrastructure, right? And they just launched earlier today Bridge, their own bridging application. So beforehand, where CCTP was being incorporated into so many different top bridging protocols, now they're competing there. So I think that Circle is realizing that the idea of being simply an issuer is not enough. And I think that their view is that playing on the infrastructure side, especially with the launch of OnChain and whenever they launch, probably sometime this year, their goal is to be able to bring over the DeFi ecosystem. However, when you have situations like this, the question becomes for most people, why move to an ecosystem where your funds could be, frozen at any time? And then in the case of something bad happening, how likely is it that your funds will even be secure? So just because you're an issuer and you're now trying to become an infrastructure player does not mean that you're going to win over every single user on the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Well, Circle responded to some of the criticisms last week, basically saying that freezing funds is based on legal compulsion from law enforcement. But I guess with Tether, I mean, USAT is their US arm, but in this case, in the partnership with Drift, we're talking about USDT. Is that a reason that they are able to kind of intervene and maybe act quicker than USDC because they're an offshore entity? They don't have as many ramifications if they kind of intervene and kind of get tangled up in the law. Like, kind of what's your view on like USDT versus USDC and kind of like the reasoning that Circle laid out versus what Tether has been doing here?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the sort of perspective USDC has had for a while, right? And I do think that's kind of where more regulatory clarity is necessary. I was reading some takes online where they were saying if the Clarity Act had been put into place, a situation like this wouldn't have occurred, right? Circle would have been able to move in more quickly. So I think it's maybe less USDC versus USDT on the regulatory side. It's just a mention for all the large stakeholders who are part of that process to start working more collaboratively together, so that way they can actually come to a solution. I think that a lot of the ecosystem is waiting for that, and that's kind of why we haven't seen the markets in terms of on-chain activity return to the way that they were. While all other markets have been moving quite well in recent weeks, we're still seeing DeFi as a whole be relatively slower. So I would position the legal argument as USDT versus USDC as not being maybe the best one, but from an infrastructure perspective, it's probably the right one.
Mm-hmm. I also have the question of kind of, if Circle intervenes, then what does that mean about like decentralized assets, right? And like kind of just letting them move freely. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like people want things to be decentralized and then they're like, well, stop the hack.
I think that's where like,
is that an unfair take?
Well, it's like code is law until the fact that
right.
the stable
until law is law. Yeah.
Until we don't like it. Yeah. Yeah.
But also Circle is a centralized stablecoin issuer, right?
Yeah, so I guess they're not under the decentralized realm. But another question I had for you, Ayyan, is you've said that the question isn't whether or not Solana DeFi bounces back from the Drift hack, but what it looks like when it evolves. So what does that next version of DeFi look like to you?
The next version of DeFi probably focuses a lot more on, let's say, stable assets and utilization of assets that have more productive utility across the ecosystem. I think for the longest time, crypto has been a proponent for its own weaknesses, which is it depends upon volatility. It depends upon like these arbitrage opportunities that exist because infrastructure is not really where it should be at. And I think the market has matured all across the board. We've seen infrastructure improve significantly. You have competitive platforms like Hyperliquid that are coming in and making sure that centralized exchanges cannot dominate most of the perp volumes that we see on chain. And we're starting to see, again, why is Solana and why the foundation is so aggressively working towards making the Drift situation right is because they believe the same thing. So I think that's kind of where we're going to see DeFi evolving, is that there's going to be a lot more structure in terms of these markets. Every single asset should be valued for what it is and what sort of risks they inherently carry. And on top of that too, asset issuers need to be cognizant of where they are distributing their assets, or where they want to make the efforts to best distribute their assets, because even then they have to consider some level of platform risk. So now everyone's going to be considering the security mechanisms for when they want to go and work with a certain protocol or ecosystem. So for us, that's been top of mind for the past few months.
So Ayyan, in terms of the maturity that you're talking about with DeFi, I know there are going to be a lot of constraints potentially on what people can do with these assets if we do get clarity, or, you know, even just with things like yield and looping of RWAs, like, you know, there's a lot of different sort of challenges that the ecosystem faces right now, and in the light of security vulnerabilities and things like that. Like, what do you think a mature DeFi industry looks like, knowing that some of these opportunities and like the ARB that you're talking about may potentially like not exist in the US?
I guess that's the hot take. I think that is good for the ecosystem, right? Is that we need to move past being able to rely upon the very things that we consider bad, which is the arbitrage, not just regulatory, but also in terms of infrastructure, to be able to allow us to grow as an industry. If crypto matures, it shouldn't be that, you know, the idea should be that we operate on these 4-year cycles, and that we're going to see the ups and downs, and then everyone just waits for the perfect time to be able to purchase assets or be able to utilize them across the ecosystem. I think what we will start to see from a lot of teams and a lot of the ecosystem participants is a move towards more stability naturally. And then from there upon that is where the foundation for a lot of different mechanics are going to be built. So you mentioned like looping, which is probably the most popular sort of concept right now in the RWA/DeFi space. You're going to see a lot more vault managers who were historically performing players in this space actually start to slowly wind down because their strategies are not able to compete with the types of assets that are not coming into play, right? So the quality of assets increases, which thereby increases the threshold by which vault managers and people who are actually allocating the space have to operate, right? So credit teams, risk teams, everything across the board improves massively.
Ayyan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks. All right, keeping the stablecoin conversation going, kind of. We're going to talk about Paxos Labs, the product and innovation arm of stablecoin issuer Paxos, which announced a $12 million funding round that it's using to build out a new platform that lets companies turn crypto into yield, lending, and stablecoin products all in one place. And let's bring in the co-founder of Paxos Labs, Bhau Kotecha. Bhau, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. All right, let's start off. First of all, congrats on the raise. I feel like it's hard to raise money in this market. But you said that you plan to use the money to roll out Amplify. And there's a lot of different platforms out there offering yield and lending. So what makes Paxos Labs different from what's already out there?
Yeah, so there's a few things here, right? And like maybe like some of the origins of like why we decided to build Amplify and Paxos Labs, right? So Paxos has been issuing stable coins for almost longer than anyone in the space, right? Was the original issuer of Binance USD back in the day, is this year PYUSD, issuer of USDG, USDP back in the day. So we spent a lot of time thinking about stable coins over the last decade, and what has become kind of clear to us is the combination of stable coins and access to crypto assets is kind of like step one for a lot of enterprises and institutions. People are starting there. Just yesterday, Charles Schwab announced they're going to start to enable crypto trading on their platform using Paxos infrastructure. So they're all coming. But what we have been thinking about over the last couple of years is just access is kind of just step one, right? You very much want to do things with those assets once they're on your platform. And so what we're starting to build out here on the Paxos Lab side is our Amplify product suite, which is really around how do I enable utility on top of the digital assets on my platform. So that might be stablecoin lending, that might be borrowing against your crypto assets, that might be actually doing some branding around existing assets. So that's kind of the suite that we're starting with. And the vision is very much more so to say, anything you might want to do with these assets, we're going to help you build that utility layer on top of, right? So that might be, hey, you want to plug into prediction markets via your app, right? What makes our kind of platform different is one is kind of the all-in-one nature, right? You do a single integration, you get the access to lending, you get the access to turn on borrow, you're going to get access to additional on-chain products. But I think the other thing that's worth calling out is our kind of enterprise and institutional DNA has enabled us to really understand our customer at a very deep level, right? We're building some of the risk and compliance guardrails around our platform that makes it so enterprises can actually do this, right? Some examples of the types of things that we hear from kind of enterprise or institutional clients is, hey, I need to make sure that the pools I'm interacting with have the proper screening on them, right? I need to make sure that there's the proper sanction screening, or I want to understand, hey, how can I deploy to a KYC pool? How can I think about the risk frameworks that I'm being exposed to, right? And so we are able to do that and configure their integration in a way that meets their specific enterprise requirements. And so that's really what sets us apart. It's a platform, but it's not necessarily one size fits all, and it's very configurable. And so it enables the enterprises to kind of step into these on-chain markets in a way that's comfortable for them.
So is this product focused more for institutions and enterprises as opposed to retail Bao, or is it kind of a mix of both?
Yeah, it's definitely focused on enterprises, right? We're a neutral infrastructure provider, right? We're not a retail platform. We're not competing for our customers and users, right? So we're very much focused on providing these services to our customers. Now, I think there are kind of a range of customer profiles that we work with, right? On one end, it's kind of like the very large enterprises, institutions. You have the fintechs, the larger fintechs, but also we're working with crypto native platforms, chains, crypto neobanks, and so there's a range of customers here. I think on the enterprise side or the institutional side, people are stepping into crypto and I think are being educated on what else they can do. And then on the other side of the market with the crypto native neobanks or platforms or exchanges, they're very much ready to move on this product today, right? And so that's kind of where we're spending our time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I imagine the demand for products like yield bearing, products, crypto lending products is probably higher right now, just because, in the DeFi space, especially because of the debates going on in Washington right now. Stablecoin issuers like Paxos, probably exchanges like Coinbase, are not going to be able to offer yield products directly to customers. So is DeFi the space where retail customers can go to earn yield on certain products? Is that going to be the space where you're going to probably see the most demand going forward on products like this?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think the cat's kind of out of the bag on, especially international markets, as people think about like, hey, like stablecoin balances should earn some amount of yield. And so if legislation goes a certain way where it's more difficult for exchanges or issuers to pass forward yield, I very much think connectivity to DeFi becomes kind of a table stakes feature for these platforms, right? And I think especially like in today's market with products like Amplify, with embedded wallets, is becoming easier and easier and more seamless to offer DeFi access to your end users in a very kind of walled garden way, right? Like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, if you wanted to go deploy stablecoins on-chain markets, you had to be a level of sophisticated actor that, majority of customers are not. I think the product stacks have come a long way, and what we've built with Amplify, I think, has really brought things a long way, where users can experience this kind of set of on-chain liquidity in a very kind of streamlined way without needing to understand the ins and outs of DeFi themselves.
How do you guys think about vaults? Like, this is a very direct question, but like just adding some context is like, I think that space has changed so much maybe in the last like 12 months. People moving out of liquidity pools, moving into these like permissionless but also managed sort of structures. And obviously the issuance itself getting much more, I guess, competitive and clearer with regulatory clarity. But where do you see that space kind of going, and how that impacts what you guys see in DeFi?
Yeah, so we've developed our own set of vault standards internally, and we definitely leverage vaults, right? The interesting thing for me is, there has been obviously a lot of discussion around vaults and like the growth of vaults over the last, call it 6 to 12 months. And I think it's great. And like, I think vaults are a very interesting DeFi primitive that we're definitely leveraging. But what I'll say is when we spend time with enterprises or fintechs or customers, they don't care as much about like what is a vault. They want to enable a certain experience with certain guardrails for their users. Now, vaults enable you to do that to a certain extent, right? Which is great. But I think they're kind of a piece of this broader package that we're shipping to customers, right? It's yes, there's a vault layer. Yes, there's a asset orchestration layer. Yes, there's a compliance layer. But it's all of that together. You need to position it as like, this is why it enables the experience you want for you and your platform and your end users. And so I think vaults are great. I think there's maybe even a little bit too much focus on like the technology of vaults itself versus like what does it actually enable, right? And so I think that's what I'm really excited about. We leverage vaults. We build kind of vault standards internally, but I think they're kind of like a piece of the puzzle and not just the sole solution.
When you're talking to these enterprise businesses and institutions, what would you say is the split of like American versus external countries? Because you're on crypto in America, so I want to know kind of the breakdown.
Yeah. So, I think the difference is in international markets, people are aware of the demand for these types of products and are ready to move now, right? I think some of the US based institutions are still in kind of the education phase, but they're very much learning the importance of adding kind of these value add features on top of stable coins and digital assets, right? I think it's actually a great thing that Coinbase is a publicly listed company, right? Because they disclose kind of the aspects of their business. And so the banks and the fintechs we talk to in the US kind of look at Coinbase earnings and say, hey, I'm actually seeing that, on-chain lending is a 9-figure business line, or, borrowing against crypto assets is, they've originated $1 billion of loans. Like their platforms, both in the US and outside the US, are very much trying to recognize if you really want to build a crypto business in your platform, it's not just about offering access to trading. It is about building the value add services and the financial services on top of them. And so I think people are increasingly understanding that in the US, and we're spending a lot of time with clients educating them on, here's how you build a great crypto business. If that's what your ambition is, here's how you can go compete with the Coinbases of the world. You need to offer these services as well.
So, Bao, I have to ask before we let you go, what do you think is going to be the most interesting thing that Paxos puts out there on the market over the next 6 months?
Ooh, I like that one.
Ooh, so I think one of the things that I'm the most excited about from what we're working on the Paxos Labs side is a lot of the yield products out on the market today say, hey, here, I can make it easier for you to deploy onto an existing DeFi protocol. Right. One of the things that we're working on and we're hearing more about is, can you help me do it in a very compliant, managed way? Can you help me do it in a way where I'm lending to a KYC counterparty, or I'm lending to a KYB counterparty, right? And so our ability to actually offer these configurable options is what I'm the most excited about, right? To bring more of this capital on chain. Some of the capital is limited to coming on chain because of the fully permissionless and non-guardrailed markets today. Can we bring some of those guardrails in place so that more of this capital can come on chain? And I think we're looking at 10x, 100x more capital that's going to come onto on-chain markets if we can solve this problem.
Awesome.
All right. Well, congrats on the raise, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Yes, thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Bao. All right.
All right. Let's keep the party going.
Keep the party going.
Stables all day. Stablecoin Friday.
Stable coins. Stable coins. Yeah.
I think we're going to bring it up with our next guest, but the crux of what we're going to talk about is the DeFi guidance from the SEC that was released on Monday. It said that crypto interfaces, including DeFi front ends, wallet extensions, and apps, may not have to register as broker-dealers if they meet certain conditions. And it gives builders more certainty in an area that basically has been pretty difficult to navigate under U.S. securities law. But our next guest says that the guidance may not solve the bigger problem at hand. Let's bring him in. Salman Banaei, he's the general counsel of Plume. Salman, welcome to Crypto in America.
Thank you, Eleanor. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. You were at the tokenization hearing, the House Financial Services Committee, which I was watching a couple weeks ago. I think you were also at the Vanderbilt Digital Assets Summit. Is that right?
He's everywhere.
You're everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. And today I'm actually in a conference room here at Harvard Law. There's an event here as well.
Nice. Well, thank you for taking the time.
Been making the rounds in the academic circuit for sure.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with us while you're at a conference. I want to ask, the SEC is framing this as clarity for DeFi, but is this really new, what we're seeing from the agency, or is it kind of just confirming what was already true and what developers kind of already knew to be true?
Well, that's actually one of the questions. One of the implications of the SEC granting or the trading markets granting this safe harbor is, does this go beyond what the case law has to say around who has to register as a broker? So we have really strong precedent out of the SEC versus Coinbase case in the Southern District of New York, where providing a wallet that provides swapping functionality, generally speaking, does not trigger the need to register as a broker. And so this guidance seems to go beyond that. And so in doing that, they're implying that the firms that meet the conditions might otherwise, and this could be under a future commission, have to register as a broker. So that's one of the negative implications of this. Now, in the short run, for the 5 years that the staff says they will live by this safe harbor, we might not have to worry about it, but beyond that, we do. One of the other key points that I made in a recent tweet was the SEC doesn't have the authority to exempt brokers or firms that might otherwise have to register as a broker as financial institutions under the Bank Secrecy Act. So that remains an outstanding issue, even with this guidance.
Mm-hmm. Salman, I know you also have said that this doesn't help platforms that function like brokers, but where exactly does a front end cross that line? And then what are some examples of platforms that function like broker dealers that this guidance wouldn't help?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the confusing things about this safe harbor is it does have some exclusions. So it says if you, for example, take or route orders, then you might then you wouldn't be covered. But then one of the conditions is around exactly that. So disclosing how the user interface is routing orders. So it's a bit internally inconsistent. Now, there's the rule of lenity. If, somebody is complying with the positive conditions, then this negative condition might be interpreted narrowly by a court. But I don't think we're going to see much enforcement action on this front, for the time being. But nevertheless, a future commission, might highlight these internal contradictions and narrow the applicability of the safe harbor.
Yeah, Salman, we jumped straight into the legalese here, which I appreciate. But I want to take a small step back just for our audience. So when I look at guidance like this, and then I also pair this kind of on the other side of the regulatory aisle with the no action letter for Phantom dealing with more connectivity to futures markets, specifically in commodities. What are the types of assets that are affected by this? In terms of needing to be a broker dealer, what are the types of things that change or that can be affected here?
Yeah, so I think permissionless securities tokens would be the types of products that you'll see these covered user interfaces providing access to. So I just loaded up my wallet, my Robinhood wallet, and I did a search for NVIDIA. And you get a range of different types of products. Some of them, are more legitimate. They're offered by regulated institutions and have independent custodians and provide reserve reports like Ondo and Xstocks, Kraken's Xstocks type products. But some of them are straight up scam tokens. And one of the surprising things here was there was no affirmative. One of the conditions wasn't a condition that said, "Hey, try to filter out, the obvious scam tokens." And I think that is going to be a long-term problem because I could see lawmakers, a future commission, maybe even people at the commission, looking to see what types of products are offered on these types of covered user interfaces. And a significant chunk of them are going to be scam tokens that purport to be a representation of a regulated U.S. equity product. Another type of product that won't be covered absent some additional integrations with regulated brokers would be the whitelisted products that DTC is going to offer soon that will be offered for trading on platforms like NYSE and NASDAQ. Those are required to have whitelisting, which means the wallet has to have undergone KYC by a broker or other kind of financial institution. So unless a covered user interface is working with a broker that could provide access to those products and the NYSE and NASDAQ trading engines, then those types of products wouldn't automatically be available to these user interfaces.
I have another, I guess, kind of like in the weeds follow up on that. You know, given the regulatory environment right now, I know there are a lot of projects who are looking at compliance or licensing almost as a moat. And so I think one of the things, like, you know, maybe I do want to just become a BD, right? And like, and maybe that gives me, you know, more access absence this, you know, this guidance. But can you say a little bit more, and not to like put you on the spot on this, but I know you spent some time with the commission, all that. What are the types of things that would be interesting to you if I decided maybe I should be an ATS instead, right? Like, what are the types of sort of, I guess, flexible kind of innovations you could see based on licensing in this kind of an environment?
Yeah, so I think you know, one of the things that you know, Eleanor, you mentioned you saw at the you were at the Vanderbilt conference. Chair Atkins spoke there, and he said one of the conditions coming up for the innovation exemption is going to be that the covered trading protocols would have to only allow access to KYC wallets. So it sets up an interesting situation where the SEC has gone quite broad in granting relief to DeFi interfaces when it comes to this trading and market safe harbor. But at the same time, this innovation exemption looks like it's going to be limited to trading protocols that have some restrictions around you know, KYC wallets. So it sets up an interesting bifurcated market structure for on-chain tokenized securities. You have those that can be, you know, accessible through unregulated covered user interfaces, as well as those that go through more permissioned routes. And so I think for those firms that are seeking broker licenses or have broker licenses, what this opens up is an opportunity for them to integrate with the covered user interfaces to provide access to the more regulated US products, as well as, you know, offshore wrapped securities tokens.
Is a bifurcated market structure a good thing, Salman? I can't tell by your tone there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the market evolves as more liquidity comes into, you know, the spreads that we see with the wrapped products might come down as market makers, you know, arbitrage against the two markets. So it's going to be an interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how these markets develop in this bifurcated format. This SEC is, you know, both experimenting with unlocking more permissionless access to tokenized securities while also setting up a framework for more regulated on-chain products at the same time. And I think there's going to be opportunity for those that try to bridge the gap, and that's what we're trying to do here at Plume.
Yeah, and SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, she writes great speeches, and she often follows up either, well, these days she's not dissenting on much that comes out of the staff guidance. So she agreed that this was good guidance, but she also said that she wanted to see a more permanent approach that would basically address the broker definition. What would you like to see that there would be an improvement on this guidance? Is there anything that would kind of do it for you that would be like, okay, this is good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking medium to long term, and the fact that this guidance doesn't, for example, have an affirmative condition to screen against, you know, scam tokens that purport to be, you know, NVIDIA stock or other, you know, widely recognized equities, is going to set up a situation where there's going to be a lot of criticisms of this, and so I think. You know, for the user interfaces out there, in order to set themselves up for, you know, longer term success, they should maybe try to do something around those types of products. You know, there is a condition in there that the user interface can apply filters of sorts as long as they do them. And so that might be one of the areas where we could see best practices evolving for those user interfaces that do want to see as a part of their user experience access to tokenized securities.
So Salman, yeah, really appreciate you coming on. I know we're going to let you get back to the conference. I'm experiencing FOMO not being up there, but I'm sure it's going to be a good day. I have to ask you, there's been a lot of talk about, obviously, I think we're going to get some kind of clarity from the CFTC here on commodities-based perpetual futures. And the other sort of gorilla in the room is perpetual futures on equities, which I think, you know, people see as firmly falling into, you know, security-based swap territory. Where do you think we're going to go on that in the US? Because I know a lot of products are being launched outside the US, but we still really don't have any kind of idea what could happen there. What are your thoughts on that space?
Yes, the CFTC has broad exemptive authority under Section 4C of the Exchange Act, of the Commodity Exchange Act. And I advocated for the CFTC coming out with its own innovation exemption for perpetuals. There's some indications in, you know, Chairman Selig's public statements that something like that might be forthcoming. And I've also suggested in a comment letter to the CFTC that the approach to perpetuals should be harmonized with the SEC's approach to securities derivatives as well. So I'm hopeful that once the agencies move forward, they in a harmonized way, and, you know, we can unlock access to leverage products across both markets.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah, really appreciate you coming on today, and look forward to the next time we can continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, no shortage of developments in the space.
Yeah.
So it's going to be
That's
for
for sure.
years.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Cool.
Salman. All right, guys. Nice substantive, can't speak, can't say that word.
Yeah.
Substantial?
Substantial. I don't know.
Friday.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, there we go. Substantial episode today. Not that they're never always substantial, but, you know,
Yeah.
lots of good information in there. All right, y'all. Have a great weekend. And next week, not Miami next week, right? The week after that.
No, beginning of May.
May.
Maybe May?
We'll see you there.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks,
Thanks for
guys.
listening in.